In the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros, it is impossible to be loved or even hated by all, but one can be loved or hated by most. Through action and reaction, consequence and coincidence, the tide of opinion from characters and readers alike can be swayed in an instant. No clearer is this than in the case of Theon Greyjoy. From Prince of the Iron Islands to murderous turncloak to stammering cripple, Theon's journey is one filled with multiple conflicting emotions. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Exploring Fiction. As readers, we grow to hate Theon until we are almost forced to pity him. Throughout A Song of Ice and Fire, George R.R. Martin's characterization of Theon presses us to question our loyalties and values as readers. So, who exactly is Theon Greyjoy, and why is he such an interesting character? Let's explore. Theon Greyjoy was born in the year 278 or 279 AC, to Lord Balon Greyjoy and Lady Alanis Harlaw. He had 3 siblings, his older brothers Roderick and Meryn, and his older sister Asha. Lean, dark, and handsome, Theon grew up to be a vain and rather arrogant young man. Sporting black hair, gold and black clothes, and a sword gifted to him from Dagmar Cleftjaw himself, he was truly a youth of Iron Island royalty. His father, and the drowned god he served, had other plans, though. At the mere age of 10, Theon Greyjoy was taken hostage by Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell as a result of the failed Greyjoy's rebellion, helmed by Theon's own father. Notably, his older brothers perished in the fighting. Lord Stark raised Theon as his ward at Winterfell for 9 years, where he was treated as one of Eddard's own children. Still, the Lord of Winterfell was cold and distant. This sparked the first change in Theon Greyjoy's character, as the more time he spent in Winterfell, the further away he grew from the traditions of the Iron Islands. The iron price became the gold price, to which he grew quite accustomed. Theon spent the remainder of his time as Winterfell's ward, training at arms with Robb Stark, who he grew to love as a brother, Jon Snow, and Sir Roderick Castle. And when he wasn't learning to fight, he was learning to love, allowing his promiscuous side to get the better of him many a time. Throughout the first book in A Song of Ice and Fire, A Game of Thrones, Theon is often seen not far from the side of the Lord of Winterfell, whether that be Eddard Stark or his son Robb. Theon is quick to call for action as Lord Eddard's situation in King's Landing grows worse, and he appears to be one of Robb's most loyal men. He even goes as far as to save young Bran Stark from a group of rogue wildlings and Night's Watch deserters in the Wolf's Wood, shooting and killing Stiv. When Ned Stark finally meets his demise in the capital, Theon stands tall with Robb, backing him as king in the north. In A Clash of Kings, however, Theon begins to present to the readers that he is more than just headstrong and cocky, but rather insecure and traitorous. King Robb sends Theon back home to the Iron Islands as an ambassador, in an attempt to forge an alliance with Theon's father, Lord Balon Greyjoy. The king in the north underestimated what such a homecoming would do to his friend, though. Theon presents his father with Robb's offer and even proposes to take Casterly Rock for himself, but Balon flatly rejects him. The Lord of the Iron Islands claims Theon has grown soft in his time away, exchanging the way of the iron price for that of the gold price, the way of the Iron Islands for those of the green. This awakens a disturbance in Theon's very character. Half his life had been spent in Winterfell, but he was born an Iron Islander. With which did he identify most? Who was he really? Willing or not, Theon decides to go along with his father's plan of raiding and conquering the north, even gaining command of some ships and Ironborn. Theon begins his attack on the north, raiding some small villages, and is met with cries of traitor. Eventually, the Prince of the Iron Islands grows underwhelmed in his duties, dreaming of a conquest far greater than his current escapade. Sending his uncle Aeron Damphair Greyjoy on with most of his ships and Dagmar Cleftjaw ahead to attack Torrhen's Square, Theon is finally free to enact his grand plan. As the majority of fighting men in Winterfell move to defend their lands, the young Greyjoy takes his 20 men and captures the Grand Castle in the night. The once Ward of Winterfell becomes its prince, taking young Bran and Rickon as hostages and donning a crown of glistening black and gold to match the colors of his house. Under Theon's watch, or lack thereof, Bran and Rickon escape Winterfell along with Osha, Hodor, and Mira and Jojen Reed. After an unsuccessful recovery attempt, Theon kills 2 boys alike to Bran and Rickon in appearance from the nearby mill at the behest of Reek, a captive recently taken into his service. And thus is Theon's greatest blunder. The loyal subjects of Winterfell believe their young lords dead, with Prince Greyjoy to blame. As Sir Roderick returns to Winterfell from a victory at Torrhen's Square, Theon looks to his sister Asha for aid, and while she arrives with some men, her attitude is not what Theon expected. Rather than awe, his sister displays indifference and even disdain at his conquest of the Great Winterfell. While she chastises him, Theon grows enraged, demanding respect for his great feat. None is found from his sister, though, who leaves quickly, nor from Ironborn or Northmen alike. With Sir Roderick on his doorstep, Theon frees Reek and asks him to find help from the Dreadfort. Reek returns swiftly and decimates Roderick's men, but only after Theon threatens the old knight with the murder of his daughter if he does not surrender. Seeing Reek's victory, Theon welcomes him back to Winterfell and attempts to congratulate him, but learns too late that Reek is actually Ramsay Snow, the bastard of Bolton. Ramsay strikes Theon, ending his reign of terror, and puts Winterfell to the torch. Theon is not seen, save for a piece of skin, in A Storm of Swords, but is mentioned in various conversations concerning the events that took place in Winterfell and what became of him. Similarly, in A Feast for Crows, Theon is but a name only. He is brought up at the Great Kingsmoot of the Iron Islands, an event used to decide the next ruler of the Seastone Chair after his father Balon fell to his death on Pike sometime after the burning of Winterfell. After a lengthy absence during which we as readers may speculate that Theon Greyjoy has actually perished, he makes his return in A Dance with Dragons, albeit in a pathetic manner. In the dungeons of the North, Theon is tortured by his former ally Ramsay Snow. He has lost many fingers and toes that were removed only after being flayed, and teeth as well, only because Ramsay claimed to dislike Theon's smile. The formerly handsome Iron Islander looks as though he has aged 40 years, and hobbles about like an old man from the loss of his toes. Many of the activities he once enjoyed are now a distant dream to him, as he can no longer shoot a bow, ride a horse, or even eat proper food without great pain. And, as if that wasn't enough, Theon was psychologically tortured as well, often being aided in escape, only to realize it was a farce put on by Ramsay all along. This caused Theon to grow paranoid, to the point that Ramsay convinced him he was not, in fact, Theon Greyjoy, but, you guessed it, Reek. Theon, now Reek, becomes a servant boy to the bastard of Bolton, all while living in tortured fear of the man. After speaking for Ramsay at Moat Cailin, Theon begins to work under Ramsay's father, Lord Roose Bolton. Theon is presented to Ramsay's bride, Arya Stark, who he secretly recognizes to be Sansa's childhood friend, Jane Poole. Ramsay recognizes Theon as her closest of kin, being that he was a ward of Winterfell, and orders him to give her away at the wedding. Theon obliges out of his fear of Ramsay, despite the pleas of the girl. Then, as the wedding becomes the bedding, Theon is forced by the man he fears most to prepare Arya for him, to which he again agrees. Theon grows more and more depressed and lost as he begins to wander Winterfell, and soon he is found by the washerwoman of a traveling bard named Abel, who is really Mance Rayder in disguise, along with his spearwives. As tensions ratchet up in Winterfell over murdered men, Theon is briefly suspected, before being determined too weak to commit murder. As the looming threat of Stannis Baratheon grows ever larger, Mance Rayder and his wives aid Theon and Jane Poole in escape. And though they are almost caught, Theon scoops up Jane and jumps the very battlements of Winterfell, landing safely in the snow. The two former captives are then ushered out to Stannis' army. Theon, weak as ever but still alive, reunites with his sister Asha, who barely recognizes the shell of her former brother. So, after all that, what makes Theon Greyjoy such a complex character? What makes him specifically stand out in a series full of intricately layered persons? Well, throughout the first two entries in A Song of Ice and Fire, Theon speaks, thinks, and acts in a manner that comes across abrasive and arrogant to readers. Sure, we may consider him one of the good guys throughout the first book when he's allied with the Lords of Winterfell, but once we get to A Clash of Kings, that excuse is gone. Theon betrays his king to rejoin the nobility of the Iron Islands, and goes even further on this path by taking Winterfell itself while Robb is away. His worst traits are pushed to the forefront with the way he treats the people he grew up with, boiling up to a point of no return when he hangs the supposed bodies of Bran and Rickon at the gates. However, as all these events transpire, there is a thread of sympathy the readers can latch onto if they choose. After all, Theon is in the midst of a crisis of identity. His life has been spent evenly between the Iron Islands, his birth home and blood family, and Winterfell, the place where he grew from a boy to a man. He wishes to not just achieve glory, but be recognized for it by one of those families. It is a vain desire, but a relatable one for many. Still, the way Theon behaves when he's captured Winterfell is meant to sour us on him, and our view of him changes from that of a spoiled ward to a detestable traitor. After his defeat at the hands of Ramsay, Theon is absent for quite some time in the narrative, and if you're anything like me when I did my first read-through of A Song of Ice and Fire, you presumed him to be dead. His actual fate is much, much worse. Theon endures so much physical and mental torture, most of it off-page, that he's become a completely different man. Gone is the cocky attitude and confident swagger, replaced instead by feeble obedience and terrified paranoia. Even if Theon was hated before, his current state hits like a punch to the gut. Seeing all the life and energy sucked out of a youthful man, even one as brash as Theon Greyjoy, just plain hurts. Theon is so subservient and broken that eventually we as readers just wish he would do something, anything to stand up for himself. That is, until we remember the type of torture he endured. Many a time he was led to believe he was inches away from making an escape, only to realize it had all been an elaborate plot set up by his captor to torment him. So, while we yearn to see Theon return to at least a semblance of his former self, we cannot blame him for his continued suffering. But, just as it seems that it would be better for Theon to die rather than keep living as the shell of a man, he finds meaning once more. This time it comes in the form of rescuing Jane Poole, and we as readers cheer as he jumps over the wall of Winterfell, desperate damsel in his arms. Wait, how did we end up here? How are we suddenly cheering for Theon Turncloak, the man who left the gallant king in the north and took his castle out from under his nose? The man who killed and displayed the corpses of two innocent boys on the walls of Winterfell in a desperate attempt to exude authority. Here lies the genius behind the character of Theon Greyjoy. He went from a man who betrayed his best friend to a man we almost root for by way of pity. No matter the character, it grows difficult to watch someone be emasculated and purposely broken, and by doing just that, George R.R. Martin called upon the pity of his audience to restore worth to the man named Theon Greyjoy. Whatever fate lies at the conclusion of Theon Greyjoy's character arc, it is safe to say he has one of the strangest stories in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. We first see him as Ward of Winterfell and friend to Robb Stark, then traitor and Prince of Winterfell, then as the lowly broken servant Reek. Throughout the series he commits murder and betrayal, and yet he suffers his own tribulations nearly equal in magnitude. Because of this, he garners pity from readers and even sympathy as he begins his path back to any phantom of his former self. Theon Greyjoy suffers a fate worse than death. So, that's all for this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new here. I'd love to have you. Visit my website, russellawellsauthor.com, for exclusive fiction and more, and sign up for my mailing list for free exclusive content. The links for both are in the description below. And, like always, I will see you next time.